Right, our final panel is about people and in our businesses, and we definitely wanted to do this one because there are some key issues surrounding employment of people, movement of people, and all sorts that fall out of this subject. So I'm very pleased to announce our panel. We have young Tom once again, still here. Nikki Gledow from the HR Point, which provides employment services to many organisations throughout the breadth of MIA and PLASA. And David Barnard, advisor to the Musicians Union, but he's also one of us. He used to work for Roland for many years and ran music services before that. So David has a real grasp about people issues as well. So Nikki has very kindly prepared a few slides for us by way of a break in proceedings. So we're going to ask Nikki to do a few slides for us first that may settle some of the questions before we even get into the questions. So Nikki, can I hand over to you?
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I have prepared a few slides because there's quite a lot of information and things that I thought was quite useful to share with you. My first slide says, what happens? Does it say that? Yep. Yeah. No, I want to go back one. Let's miss one out. Or maybe not, maybe my slides are in order. Anyway, okay, so the HR impact. The first thing to say is it's uncertain. We do know immigration is going to be impacted, but not from the 1st of November. We do know that right-to-work checks are going to become more important. So how many of you in the room employ people that may not be UK citizens? Okay, quite a few of you. How many of you do right-to-work checks on every single employee when they join your organisation? Excellent, good. I go to many organisations and they don't. I had one client where they had 80 staff and they had proof of right to work for about 5 of them. And they have a lot of EU workers as well. So they are going to become even more important. I will come on to some points around those. There is also going to be a new points-based immigration system that's in consultation at the moment. There's a white paper out there, and there are some views out there as to what that might look like. That won't be coming in until the 1st of January 2021, I believe. So quite a while, but it's worth being aware of that because that's going to impact you even if you employ non-UK and non-EU residents. So you need to be aware of that. So if we leave on the 31st of October, which is still a possibility, I've just checked my phone, the EU have decided they're not going to make a decision until after the government's vote on Monday about the election. So they've said, yes, we probably think you need an extension, but they haven't said a decision on how long. So I go back to my first point, it's uncertain. So immediately, immigration isn't going to change. Your non-UK resident workers are not going to have to leave the country. They are going to be able to carry on working. They are going to be able to apply for settled status. Some of your workers may have done this, some may still need to do this. The important thing is they need to have been in the country at the 31st of October, or the date we leave if there's no deal, to apply. But they have various deadlines to apply. I do apologise, I have put 2010, not 2020. It's obviously wishful thinking to go back in time. So 31st of December 2020 if there's no deal, or 20th of June 2021 if there is a deal. So there is plenty of time for them to do that. One important thing to do with right to work checks is before the law changes on immigration status on the 1st of January 2021, it will be discrimination to ask your EU workers to prove their settled status. What a minefield that is. So you can't ask them until it's too late if they haven't got it. But be aware of that. I thought that was interesting when I did my research. After the UK has left, there is talk around this European temporary leave to remain status, but there will be an application, a deadline for this. All of these deadlines, as every other deadline everyone's talked about earlier, could be subject to change depending what happened. But it's important to be aware of these are the various statuses you're going to need to look at. Of course, you may have workers out in the EU who are British UK citizens. They need to go and look on the government website and check what the rules are for the individual country that they are in at the moment. Okay, so what's the impact been already? So there has already been an impact on recruitment. The CIPD have brought out some figures regarding that. Since June, that's when the referendum was, 95% fall in EU nationals joining the UK workforce. That's a massive decline. And you will have seen reports in the media around fruit going mouldy because they haven't got any fruit pickers. So there has already been an impact around that. There's actually employers experiencing hard-to-fill vacancies. 67% of employers are currently experiencing a high proportion of hard-to-fill vacancies. That's quite a high percentage as well. Whether that's driven by EU workers not wanting to come here, EU workers going home, or uncertainty and people not wanting to change jobs because of uncertainty. It could be driven around a lot of that. Numbers of applicants for jobs have also fallen. So in the summer of 2017, there were an average of 24 applicants for each low-skilled role. In the summer of 2019, that was 15. For medium-skilled roles, that's dropped from 19 to 10. And for high-skilled roles, that has dropped from 8 to 5. And that is causing some quite big difficulties for businesses in actually recruiting the right people. So moving on to kind of look at kind of the future. After Brexit, can you recruit EU citizens? Yes, you can. You need to comply with right-to-work checks. At the moment, they can still prove their right to work by their passport or their identity document. The other thing to do if you're not doing right-to-work checks is to make sure you do those for all of your applicants or all of the people that you offer jobs to, not just those that you think might need to prove it, because that would be discrimination. There's a really good government online checking service that you can use, which gives you statutory exemption. So if that says that person has the right to work in the UK, that is legal proof that that person has the right to work in the UK. So that protects you if anything came out later to find they were an illegal worker. So my advice to my clients is, why would you not use that? And you can also check, they give you a code, you log in, put the code in, and it comes up with a page that says they've got the right to work. It will tell you whether you need to check it again, and it will tell you to print out a copy of that page and keep it. And that is your proof. So I think that's actually brilliant. Why would you not want to do that? That's the best way to check. A lot of businesses will say, we get a photocopy of the passport. You are supposed to check it's a genuine passport, that the picture looks like the person. There's quite a lot of obligations on you you have made sure those documents are correct. This cuts all of that out. Following dealing with that, one of the things I thought to look at is what will happen to employment rights post-Brexit. Very obviously, under the current exit agreement, Boris Johnson's deal, there is no commitment to protect workers' rights. Theresa May had a clause in there regarding aligning to EU regulations. That's notably absent. There is nothing in there. That potentially gives the government free will to change UK legislation that has been derived from EU directives. That's age discrimination, Cheapy regulations, working time regulations. So quite a lot that gives flexibility to change. Some of you may think that's a good thing. Some of you may think that's a bad thing. The reality is it could be more change. Immediately, nothing will change. So if we leave at the end of this month, on the 1st of November, nothing changes. Rights don't change, rights to work don't change. Carry on as you are, but be aware that things could change. So there's no certainty over what might change, but I've done some research, got some information from leading industry experts, and come up with things that I think you guys should be aware could change. Working time regulations is one of those. People love it or hate it. 48-hour maximum working week and the opt-out. It's quite likely we might lose that 48 maximum working week. However, Labour are more inclined to look at removing the option of opting out of that. So that could go either way. So again, something you need to keep an eye on. Those of you that have employees who work and get commission, guaranteed overtime, regular overtime, any kind of incentives and things, will have looked at holiday pay recently and seen there's been a vast amount of judgments around how you calculate holiday pay. And it's an absolute minefield. The good news is we could get rid of that. that could well be rewound, and the last 10 years of legislation on that could be undone. I say could be. I'll have to put a big disclaimer on all of this. I don't know. I have no impact. I don't advise the government, and these are purely my thoughts. It's quite possible that some of the recent rules around travel time and on-call time being deemed working time could also be changed. It's also possible that we could look at redundancy consultation and reduce when collective consultation is required. At the moment, it's if over 20 employees are affected. Thoughts are that that could go up to only when it's over 100 employees affected. And if some of the economic predictions, the negative ones, come true, redundancies could well be something that people need to be aware and be ready to look at. There might also be changes to everyone's favourite bit of employment legislation, Cheapy transfers. This might be around allowing post-transfer harmonisation of terms and conditions. At the moment, you can't do it, and there is an indefinite protection for employees who've cheaply transferred into your organisation. There's a possibility there may be rules around allowing harmonisation, which could make people's lives a lot easier. Again, on all of that, we need to watch this space. So I may not have answered any of your questions because I don't have any definite answers on anything, but hopefully given you some things that you need to think about, I'm happy to answer any questions when it comes to that section. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nikki. David, anything you want to add to that at this point?
At this point?
Yes, because we might come back to you again.
Oh, well, shall I say a few words? And then
say a few words,
and we'll
David.
ask questions.
Okay.
Okay.
You do it your way, yeah. As usual.
Sorry, I'm a musician. What do you expect? Good morning, everybody. I wasn't actually down to do this gig today, so I'm a little bit kind of improvising as I go along. As Paul said, I'm here in the capacity of Musicians Union, but I also have other lives as well. And so yesterday I was with Paul, we were talking about education, and I'm involved in lots of other music education related things. So forgive me if I, to coin Ross's phrase earlier, if I'm a little bit suboptimal in this presentation, but I'll do my best. But overnight I spoke to a couple of friends of mine who work in the industry as a tour manager and as a performer, and one of them, in fact both of them together, are about to do a tour next year of 50 European cities. So I think it was quite apt to hear them laughing, crying, asking for another drink whilst debriefing them last night. It's quite interesting yesterday when we talked about in education that it's good to be disruptive. It's good to kind of shake things about a bit and in order to create positive change. And I have to confess that I'm struggling to find where the positivity is with this whole Brexit business. And you think about all the money that has been spent in preparing for this. Just imagine we could spend that on education. We probably wouldn't have a crisis anymore. It's really interesting listening to previous speakers as well. I have to pay tribute to everybody who's spoken so far. And isn't it wonderful? I think in particular reference to the VELTA organisation and Freight Transport Association, how calm and collected you are, and so and that you are problem solvers, which is so great to hear. And I think your advice, which is speak to your freight, your freight supplier, is really good advice. The interesting thing is half my family are Canadian, and I've got friends in Australia, and they keep contacting me and saying, "Is everything okay? Are you okay?" Yes, well, here we are. It's interesting to know about the music industry, where it's worth about just under £5 billion when you consider all the different aspects of what's in it. And last year it grew probably the fastest than any other industry in the country. It exports about £2.6 billion. It's essentially a portfolio career for self-employed businesses and self-employed people. There are about 145,000 people employed at the moment. And the prediction is that over the next 5 to 10 years, nearly 3,500 jobs that are essentially focused on touring may evaporate. We just don't know, but that we are expecting that employment bank to reduce over the next few years. The majority of our members in the MU, we have about 30,000 MU members, are self-employed. 81% of those members rely on performing as their main source of income. But it's also really interesting to note that 78% of those people earn less than £30,000 a year. And they are dependent a great deal on keeping things the same, because if there are changes to their modus operandi, that has massive financial impact for them. The predicted shrinkage in GDP and the shrinkage in earning capacity, I think, for musicians has a significant impact, and we shouldn't underestimate that. A lot of bands that are emerging, I know a lot of you deal with big bands that are and big acts, but underneath that, fueling our whole industry, are the small bands that load up a van and cross the channel and travel around Europe. Actually, that's how often bands get established, by doing those gigs around Germany, where they can actually get some really decent audiences, and that's how they build their on-site social media presence and start to build their brand before they start to establish themselves in this country. So they are deeply concerned about this, and any change to that modus operandi is a challenge. One of my friends organizes orchestral tours, and he explained to me that it's very interesting that classical music is actually one of our growing exports. We have some fantastic orchestras in this country, and the European countries want to hear those. But if you go on a 2-week tour, you'll probably do 2 concerts. That's including travel. There's a bare minimum of free time. And members of orchestras now will have between 15 and 20 different nationalities within those orchestras. Now, what that means as far as visas and travel permits, I don't know, but it's a big unknown issue. And of course, we've talked a bit about Carnet and the issue of that. And any disruption in that tour program, bearing in mind drivers and their limits on hours, if there is any delay in going through customs at any point, then there are going to be challenges to the whole schedule. So I just want to finish off really. There's a couple of other issues here which I think is worth noting, that a lot of our orchestras in this country are dependent on foreign players, particularly in strings. So coming back to the point Nikki was making, we just don't know what that points immigration system is going to be, and that is a big concern for us. So I think just to kind of follow on from what Nikki was saying about workers' rights, it's fascinating to see that I deal a great deal with people who are on 0-hour contracts, who are on self-employment, and in many cases on very bogus arrangements, and we really got to be very careful with that. And I do think, and you'll appreciate this, which is if you treat your workforce well, you will get good return for that. And it's quite shocking statistic that when you look at the top 30 economies in the country, and when you look at where we score as far as workers' rights, we are number 27. When you look at the countries who are at the top, Norway, Denmark, Belgium, etc., who are at the top, and compare that with productivity, and you see the same countries who've got high levels of workers' rights and high levels of productivity, it just makes sense. So I think that's something we're all going to have to keep an eye on.
Thanks, David. We're very tight on time. Tom, is there anything you want to add to... Yeah, thank you, David. Well said, obviously. Tom, anything you'd want to add on this subject?
Yeah, well, at first I'd just say thanks to Nikki for basically saying everything that I would and could have. Just to, sort of reiterate this point about the future immigration system, the white paper that is out there and that exists has been superseded by the Migration Advisory Committee going up for consultation on it, and the request from the Prime Minister and Home Secretary for it to look into points-based, Australian-style points-based immigration system. It means we don't know how much of the original white paper will be retained. will be due to find out the MAC will be. It winds up in November. It'll be publishing its initial conclusions around January time. So we'll be able to start having some sense of what the future immigration system will look like. I'd repeat those, the sort of confirmation that pretty much regardless of what Brexit emerges, as far as EU citizens coming over to, or EEA citizens coming over here to work, live, play, nothing changes until that new immigration system is developed and put into place, which I hope is reassuring. One thing I would add to that is that it was announced over the course of the last month a change in policy on being able to enter the UK with EEA ID cards. Originally, it was announced by the Home Secretary that EU citizens would be able to enter with just those cards until December 2020. It has now been decided that the use of those cards will be phased out over the course of 2020. Right. Don't know when. We haven't heard more. So watch this space on that. Otherwise, I would just also want to reiterate that applying for the EU settlement scheme is about as easy a process as applying for the right to sort of live and work in a country as exists anywhere in the world. That's not me kind of saying that as an official. That's actually, it is the easiest, simplest and fastest sort of route to being able to stay in a country that exists anywhere. So sort of actively encouraging anyone that might be worried, any EU citizens under your employ or just friends, to engage with that and get their status. It comes through pretty quickly. So do that. Don't wait on what the sort of political situations will be. Otherwise, I think move to sort of questions and throw it out to you.
We are at the magic hour for lunch, but there is time for a question or two if there are any out there. I'm conscious we haven't got the answers yet. Did anyone want to ask anything? Stephen?
Yeah, Stephen from Denniswick Products in Poole. We have full employment in Poole, so we're very reliant on recruiting, especially Eastern European staff when we need them. And that we've checked all their details and they're good to stay. We use an agency. Will that agency still have access to European people to work, or will people without a job be able to come here to sign on for the agency?
That's a really good question. A large part of that so this is where the proposed salary threshold in the sort of future immigration system sort of comes into play. Until the end of 2020, things stay as they are. Absolutely no change. All I can do is reiterate that post that, when the new system comes in, we don't know what that system looks like. They haven't, the existing white paper is now irrelevant. Everything that was in it is liable for change with the review sort of underway. So we just don't know what it'll look like. One thing I would say, actually, though, is that the MAC is taking on a huge amount of feedback about how damaging the proposed £30,000 cap would be, especially across the sort of arts and culture and heritage sectors, where it's very well known that there is a lot of very high-skilled, low-pay work that the £30,000 cap would gut. sectors. So that's really being taken on board. But one other thing I would say is that there's been the removal on the cap of skilled workers, the T1 exceptional talent visas. That's been, so there was a cap on the number of them that would be currently given out. That's been removed. Ostensibly, that was for sort of scientific sort of expertise, but it also applies, well, it applies to all Tier 1 exceptional skilled workers. So that does potentially open the door for making it easier for, you know, sort of people with very specific high-end skill sets being able to make it into the country at the moment. But again, I don't want to comment on where things will stand with that sort of from 2021 onwards, because it'll all be changed with the new.
Yeah.
David, did you want to add something?
Well, I'm sure you're going to say the same thing, but I mean, is it 30,000?
30,000
It's
as it
just
stands.
bonkers. It's absolutely bonkers. I mean, you can be a rank and file string player in the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra at 22 to 25. You know, and when you have so many orchestras relying on foreign string players in particular.
Yeah, and then you think about, you know, sort of museums. You think about architects.
And I would imagine
you know,
Stephen's in the same category.
archaeologists.
Well, Tom, I mean, you said you could pass information up, but I mean, maybe you could pass on the information that we're very reliant on EU workers, you know, for the, you know, the future prosperity of our company.
Yeah, and all I'd add is that we're lucky in sending that message up, in that we also we're combining forces with, you know, Department for Health and Social Care, you know, nurses, junior doctors. You know, there are a huge number of massively important jobs that most of the UK sort of social structure and economy relies on that would be damaged by this cap. So there's a lot of lobbying going on across government to sort of have this looked at by the Home Office.
Following on from Stephen's point, I guess that our factory is no different from a large number of other manufacturers in that, you know, you get the normal triangle of people at the top and the epsilons at the bottom. It's that structure at the people at the bottom who are on just above minimum wage level that we're finding increasingly difficult to recruit. I mean, recently we advertised for a job at that sort of skill set level, quite happy to take anybody off the street and train them, but we got one applicant. You know, I'm told that in Poole there's something like 400 people applying for job seeker allowance. Of those, half will be people who don't want to work but are forced to get their benefits. 100 will be wanting to do sitting in front of a computer, and the other 100, if they exist, will be wanting to find jobs, you know, in the rest of industry. And I'm guessing that that situation is replicated in lots and lots of places around the country. Just as Nikki was saying, that there's a massive decrease in EU workers going back into their own countries again. But I mean, whether it be EU workers or British workers, I don't mind. You know, they're treated with equal respect. But it is damaging our future economy. And you know, as you said, we're in a growing industry, but we can't if we don't have people to do the jobs. And you know, that's despite trying to do automation.
Have you tried talking to your nearest further education college?
We did some while ago, and we appointed an apprentice who stayed with us for about a year and then found himself a better job. And good luck to him. But so that proved an opportunity, but one that for us didn't work out.
Okay, let's talk afterwards.
Right, I think we're going to have to probably hold it there. I'm conscious we couldn't put everything to bed today. Surprise, surprise. But I hope it's been of some use. Don't forget it's been filmed, so we'll have all the data we can send out to the people that couldn't come from your organisations. We'll have the PowerPoints we can send out as well. I think from Peter and me, there's just a couple of things we must say before we go. A big thank you to all of our panellists for all the work and time they put in to come and help us today. Especially Tom. And we must also say a big thanks to the staff of the MIA and PLASA who put this gig together in less than 2 weeks, having got the nod from the government we could do it. So thank you to all the staff involved. And as always, with our industry, nothing happens without you guys. So thank you all for coming. Please have a nice lunch. There's lots of networking time available. There's lots of things we can still discuss. So thank you all for coming. From Peter and myself, brilliant. And you're at Leeds on Monday if any of you missed it.